Hey guys, we're here today. We're taking apart a SP-800 DD series sanitary drum pump, and we've got a technician here that's going to kind of walk you through each of the steps. So what we've got here today is a SP-800 DD 751 P39BL. So that is a Teflon pump, 39 inches long, with a bag liner stator and an air motor. Just a few helpful hints for starters. The air motor, it's got two ports on the air motor, and you'll be able to see that. One is for the exhaust and one is for the air intake. Depending on where you locate the muffler, that's going to dictate the direction of the motor. So for this case, you're going to have to put the air on the left port, and then the muffler is going to be on the right port. If you do it the opposite way, it's going to run the pump backwards, and some of the parts are going to disassemble. So keep that in mind when you're installing the pump for the first time. Next step we're going to take a look at is going to be the disassembly and proper reassembly of the pump tube itself. Some helpful tools to have would be a wrench, some Haynes sanitary lubricant for your rotor and stator, and then a pair of pliers, and then some type of steel cylinder or a screwdriver of some sort, preferably if it's coated, so that it will protect the integrity of the housing when you're going to disassemble. So our technician is now going to show us step by step how to disassemble the pump. So the first step, you're going to get a 4mm Allen wrench, and you're going to go ahead and loosen the safety set screw located on the top hex nut of the pump. That's step one. Step two, you're going to grab your large wrench and you're going to disassemble that nut while grabbing the other tool, which you're going to put in the mechanical seal inspection port. By holding the mechanical seal inspection port still, you're going to then put the wrench on there and you're going to rotate it towards you. You're going to do that a series of times until the nut is broken loose, and then you can loosen it by hand. At this point, it should unthread quite easily. After it's loose, you just pull the whole inner tube assembly out, and you're going to turn it upside down on the workbench or table. So again, once you got the pump assembly up on the table, the next step is to disassemble the outer tube assembly. And that's going to start by taking out the Teflon gasket. Then you're going to turn the outer tube assembly upside down, and you're going to unthread the stator can and stator insert. Just keep in mind this is a reverse thread, whereas all the other connections on the pump are your traditional standard thread in terms of rotation. Alright, so once you got that out, then you're going to take out your stator insert. Sometimes if it's stuck in there a little bit, you've got to just put your finger in the end and then you just pull it right out. Keep in mind that there is a small retainer ring, and that ring is designed to keep the stator insert in place while it's inside the pump itself. So next step, we're going to go ahead and start taking apart the drive shaft and rotor assembly. There's on the end of the drive shaft, there's going to be a flat surface, so you can just get a pair of adjustable pliers, and then while holding that in place, you're going to unthread that rotor. And also note that there is a small Teflon gasket located on top of that as well, which you're going to have to remove. Alright, now we're going to go to the other side of the shaft, and we're going to disassemble that from the bearing housing. A couple things to note here. You can use that same 4mm Allen wrench, and you're actually going to put that through the mechanical seal inspection port, and then in there you're going to see a shaft from the bearing housing, and there's going to be a hole in that shaft. So go ahead and put the 4mm Allen screw through the mechanical seal inspection port and into that shaft. And what that does is that actually keeps the drive shaft from spinning, so it locks it into place. With your adjustable pliers, you're going to grab the flat surface on the drive shaft, and you're going to unthread that. And then the next step is to remove the Teflon gasket that's going to be on the top part of the shaft, which will be located just below your mechanical seal spring. After you've done that, we're going to go ahead and remove the mechanical seal spring that just pulls right off. And then you're going to pull the top part of the mechanical seal off. Sometimes you got to rotate it just to loosen it up a little bit. It's got some gaskets in there, some Buna gaskets, and those gaskets sometimes have a form fit on the drive shaft. Alright, once you've done that, you take out the next step is to remove the 4mm Allen wrench, and you're going to push through that mechanical seal inspection port, and you're going to take out the mechanical seal bushing. Inside that bushing is going to be the bottom part of the mechanical seal. You just pull that out by hand. Alright. So now at this point, your pump is fully disassembled. You've got your bearing housing, you've got your mechanical seal bushing, gaskets, mechanical spring, drive shaft. You've got your rotor, you've got your outer tube assembly, stator insert, and stator tube. This is the point in time in which you can put this in your COP, which is clean out of place parts cleaner, and move on from there. One thing to point out, the bearing housing has got some components that should not be submerged, so this just needs to be cleaned by hand with water and soap. Okay, so now we're going to start with the mechanical seal assembly process. We're going to start by putting a very fine layer of the Haynes lubricant on the O-rings that are found in the mechanical seal, and this just makes it a little bit easier when you're putting that together. So you're going to put that in there, right inside the mechanical seal bushing. Make sure you don't put too much on there, because by putting too much, you could actually make the seal leak. So like I said, just a very fine layer. Now, one thing to point out, when you're pressing in the bottom part of the carbon seal, we recommend that you don't touch that with your fingers, that you either use a latex glove or, in this case, a paper towel. The oils in your skin can actually cause that seal to fail prematurely. So this is what the seal looks like once that's in and located in the mechanical seal assembly. So go ahead and put that on your bearing housing. Next step, let's get the top part of the seal. Make sure that seal surface is nice and clean and free of any abrasives or oils. You're going to slide that on. And also some more of the Haynes lubricant on one of your O-rings. Now this is a really important step that I'd like to point out. When you're putting on this O-ring, if you were just to slide it into place, it's going to rest on top of that seal. So just get a very small Allen wrench that's got a nice flat surface. Make sure it's not a sharp surface, but a nice flat surface, and you're actually going to push this down until it's fully seated within that top part of the seal. And you'll see that there's a nice resting area for it in that seal. Alright, and then next you're going to put on your stainless steel ring, and finally you're going to put on the stainless steel spring. Now you'll notice in the mechanical seal housing there's going to be a small hole for that spring to rest in, and that's what holds it in place. And then you're just going to push down on the top part of that spring. And I like to note that you want to make sure that it's below your threads on there. And then the next part is to put on your Teflon gasket. This should just slide right down over those threads. Once you've got your mechanical seal in place, the next step is to get that 4mm Allen wrench, and you're going to put it through the mechanical seal inspection port and into the port on the drive shaft. Again, that's used to keep the drive shaft from rotating. And now we're going to put on the drive shaft itself. So you go ahead and thread that on. And you want to make sure you don't put that on too tight or too loose, but hand tight's fine, and then maybe just one turn with a wrench. But you want to make sure you're not damaging the seal in the process. So it's nice and hand tight with a wrench. Alright, after you've done that, the next step is to put on your rotor on the top part of the drive shaft. So that begins by putting the Teflon gasket on there and then threading your rotor on. Once again, you thread it on by hand, and you're going to just hold that drive shaft with a pair of pliers, and then you're going to give it one nice turn, but again, just hand tight is fine. So once the rotor's installed in place, the next step is going to be assemble the outer tube assembly, and that's going to start with your Teflon insert. You're going to put that into the stator can itself. Now you'll notice that there is a small internal locating pin in there, and that's going to help you locate that insert so it's nice and seated. Once you've done that, you're going to put a stainless steel O-ring on the top of that, and again, that's designed so that the stator insert won't travel up the outer tube assembly when the pump's in operation. Once you've got that in place, you're going to install the stator can on the pump tube itself. And remember, these are the only reverse threads on the pump. Just nice and hand tight, no need for tools or anything else. Hand tight is sufficient. You're going to grab your Teflon gasket and you're going to locate that on the top part of the pump. And it's easier if you pull the hex nut all the way up, and that'll kind of keep it in place. And once you've got that done, you can grab your stainless steel set screw, and you can just put that in hand tight, but not all the way in, because you're going to fasten that once the pump is together. So as the case with most progressive cavity pumps, it's always a good idea to go ahead and put a very, very fine layer of lubricant on the rotor and stator. And that's designed so that you don't damage the rotor and stator when you initially start the pump. That's called running the pump dry, and that can lead to premature failure of the stator. Oftentimes with a Teflon insert, as the case with this video, it's not such a problem because there's a little bit of a loose fit between the rotor and stator, but when you use other elastomers such as Buna, sometimes this becomes a little bit more of a necessary task. But in any case, we do recommend putting a very, very fine layer of this Haynes lubricant and just applying it to the rotor itself. But again, you don't want too much, just a very, very fine layer. One thing to note, as is the case with all progressive cavity style pumps, is that you want to have proper alignment between your lobes. So you can see on the rotor itself, there's a series of lobes, and then those opposite lobes are located in the stator. And if for whatever reason those lobes are not correctly aligned, it's going to lead to premature failure of the pump. Oftentimes it's going to cause the drive shaft to break, and it's also going to cause premature wear of the stator itself. So the next step is actually very, very important, and we want to show you how to properly align those lobes when you're installing the rotor into the outer tube assembly. So by grabbing the outer tube assembly and grabbing the inner tube assembly, pick it up, insert it into the outer tube assembly itself, and it will almost seat itself, but not completely. So then what we recommend is that you fasten the hex nut just by hand. Just a helpful hint, when you are installing the inner tube assembly into the outer tube assembly, as we pointed out, it's very important to have proper lobe alignment. So you can do that by turning the actual drive shaft itself so that you're actually rotating that, and it's rotating into place as you're inserting it into the stator can. And the way you know that those lobes are properly aligned is that once everything is fastened and in place, you should be able to put your hand in there and actually turn that coupling by hand. If you can't, That's a real good indicator that you've got misaligned lobes, which could lead to premature failure. So again, it's real important that these lobes are aligned and that you can turn them by hand. So as you're beginning to tighten up the hex nut with a tool, you're going to use your Teflon steel rod, and you're going to put that in the mechanical seal inspection port, and then that's going to hold that in place. And then you're going to grab the hex nut wrench and you're going to push it away from your body. So by holding with one hand and pushing away with the other, that's going to tighten that up nice and tight. Again, it's important to note that this connection here has got to be secure and it's got to be tight. If you were to have it loose, there is a chance that when the pump begins to operate, that it could actually loosen up the whole pump assembly. As an additional safety measure, we've put a set screw that's located in the hex nut. You're going to get your 4mm Allen wrench and you're going to go ahead and tighten that up. And again, this is just an additional safety measure, so make sure that you install this every time you install the pump. So that's the most critical element in terms of disassembling and reassembling the pump. The final two steps would be to mount your motor flange, which comes in various sizes depending on the motor type you have. And that's going to be a series of 6 screws. You just mount each one of those, which go into the bearing housing. Once the motor flange is fully installed, the last step is to mount your motor. Depending on your motor design, if it's electric or air, you're going to have 4 screws or bolts that you're going to mount that are going to go through the flange and up into the motor housing itself. I would advise, though, before you mount the motor, that just a helpful hint to just check the rotation and make sure that you can still turn that drive shaft by hand, and this just ensures that your pump lobes are safely aligned.